April 2nd. We'll use a microphone this time. Call the meeting to order for April 2nd. Let's begin as we always do with our Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay.
Question for you.
Answer for you. What do you got?
How many of you remember when they added under God to the pledge?
I don't remember the date, but I remember the story about it being kind of a controversy to be had. It's like the
You remember, don't
19
you?
Well, no, I learned it without that.
Right.
Yeah, no.
1950s, something
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
that.
because I was in first grade when they added it. Just piece of trivia.
Now we know more than we want to know.
Yeah.
We need to know.
All right, I've got one other thing. I'm going to claim executive privilege
Please, go
as the
ahead.
vice chair, and I'm going to make a public service announcement. I'm taking off my planning board hat and putting on my moderator's hat.
Go.
Anyone who has requested an absentee ballot prior to today and got it in the mail, there is an error on it. Under the town council race, it says vote for no more than 2. You can actually vote for 3. So take note, we put out 60 of them. I've probably called, well, that was afterwards, but I've probably called on the phone 50 of those 60 people already. So most of them know, but if you don't know, or you haven't heard from me, you can go ahead and mark your ballot. Mark 3 if you want. You don't have to mark any if you don't want, but just, you can go up to 3. We're going to be hand counting all of those ballots, so you'll get counted correctly. So go ahead and just use the ballot. Thank you.
All right. I love public service announcements
I'll
like
put
that.
my planning board
Works.
hat back on.
It's fine. Okay, let's see. Let's have Nelson as a voting member. Mark, are you a full member or an alternate? You're an alternate. Okay, so we'll have you as a voting member tonight too. So we have 5 voting members for the meeting. Let me remind everybody that we'll address the board to make sure the microphones are turned on and you speak clearly into them so the folks at home can hear you and the minute taker can do well with our recording. Our next meeting after tonight is currently scheduled for April 16th, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. in the Matthew Thornton room, which is this room. That completes our ordinary call to order for the meeting. There is no consent agenda for tonight. And so item 3 on our agenda is Colt Refining, Inc. as the applicant and King Herrick LLC and Evan Realty LLC as the owners. Continued review for consideration of an amendment to a conditionally approved site plan for a 97,600 square foot light industrial facility and associated site improvements to split construction of the site into 2 phases. Phase 1 is proposed to consist of all site improvements in 282 square feet of the proposed building. Phase 2 is a proposal to construct the remaining, proposed to consist of the remaining 31,918 square feet of proposed building. The parcels are located at 12A Star Drive and unnumbered parcels off Herrick Street and King Street in the I-1 Industrial and Aquifer Conservation Districts. Tax map 3D-1, lots 2-1 and 20-1, and tax map 3D2, lot 20-1. Is case planning board 2024-5. It's continued from our February 20th, 2024 meeting. Robert, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
This applicant, at staff's request, has requested a continuance for 2 weeks out to April 16th. They had submitted plans that wastewater needed more information on, so we're just allowing time for wastewater to complete their review and be able to comment more fully.
Thank you, Robert. Is there any other items that might require a continuance or that are pending?
No, that's it.
Okay. What's the will of the board? Lynn?
I move we continue the application's public hearing to the April 16th, 2024 planning board meeting.
With no further notice to
With
abutters.
no further notice to abutters.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Mr. Disco. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 5-0-0. See, I counted right that time.
There you go.
I recounted. I wrote it down in case I forgot. There's 5 of us. Okay, item 4 on our agenda, Keith Curran as the applicant and Gleason Company LLC as the owners. Continued review for acceptance and final approval of a site plan to construct a 7,650 square foot manufacturing building with associated office space and other associated site improvements. The parcel is located at 63 Turbine Way in the I-1 Industrial Aquifer Conservation, Elderly Housing Overlay, and the Town Center Overlay Districts. Tax map 5D1, lot 5-1, case Planning Board 2024-2. It is continued from our January 16th, February 6th, and February 20th, 2024 Planning Board meetings. Robert, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
Yeah, just by a way of a quick recap, the applicant was last here before you on February 20th. At that time, the planning board had requested that they submit a drainage study for the property because they had not proposed any initially. They have since done that, and it has been peer reviewed by Fuss and O'Neill. I just want to note that it covers the drainage infrastructure that they are now proposing on the plan is limited to the proposed improvements that they are doing now. It does not take into account the entirety of the site. That said, I can speak more to that when that issue comes up later on. Staff still feels they've now provided enough information so the board can accept it as complete. There were 5 total. Now there's a 6th waiver request, which the board should also be able to take up tonight. And if everything goes fittingly and the board feels it's appropriate, then staff is okay with a conditional approval.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Please introduce yourself and tell us where we're at with the application.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Eli Lano. I'm an attorney with Bernstein Schur. I'm joined tonight by Keith Curran of Bowler Engineering and also Ward Gleason Sr. of Gleason Company.
Yes. Good to see you again. Good evening, Keith Curran from Bowl Engineering.
Thank you. Okay. Tell us where we're at from.
Are your
Okay.
mics on?
Sure, can you hear me? Hear it okay?
Yeah,
My
bring them
mic's
closer
on.
to you if you're
Sure.
sure they're on.
Yeah, that's good, thank you.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent.
So we're back in front of you. Basically, the main thing that was, as Robert mentioned, 2 things that were out there. One, we're asking for a waiver for stormwater. So you guys requested that we do a stormwater drainage report, which we have done and have submitted, along with Fuss and O'Neill has reviewed. We updated the plans accordingly and provided the full drainage calculations and narrative. There was some minor comments that Fuss and O'Neill had. We actually had a call with them last week. We worked through those, and we basically responded to the comments and tweaked the plans accordingly. Most of the comments were not related to the stormwater, some were, but again, that's all in our comment responses. I reached out to them today. I'm not sure if they had a chance to review, but again, we're looking for a conditional approval on just those being satisfied. We believe we've met all of their concerns and addressed them.
Okay. So when we last met, and we hadn't determined the application was complete yet because we wanted a stormwater plan, but my memory of the discussion was that we were looking for the stormwater evaluation and potential plan based on all the structures on the site, not just the new structures, because all those old structures had never been engineered or had any drainage structures built around them. Can you comment on that view? Is that different than what you took from our last meeting, or?
Yes, our discussion was, my understanding was discussion to treat the stormwater as much as possible, it being a redevelopment site. So what we did after the discussion with Fuss and Nail, and they agreed, is we met the redevelopment as if this had to go to an HDES for alteration of terrain, even though we don't. So that's the progression that we did, and that's what we provided.
Okay. So I remember there was some discussion of DES and their alteration of terrain permit, although that isn't necessarily our purview. But the discussion that I meant to convey last time was that all of the structures on the site had never been part of an approved site plan before. There is no site plan in the file or in our records for this site at all. And so every structure on here is functionally new to us, because this is the first site plan it ever appears on. And that's the approach that I had in mind for the stormwater. I don't know if you...
Sure. There's like 2 catch basins out there that you don't even know where they went. The survey went in, try to figure out where they go. We know somehow they probably make it to the Merrimack River. We're basically removing those. So we're not using those because we really don't know how, they're not doing anything. They're like full of water or full of debris. So we're installing a new stormwater treatment system. So that, you know, we don't wanna use those because again, they're already, you know, full of sediment and so forth, and they're actually being called on a plan to be removed. So, you
Yeah.
don't know what kind of level of treatment they're doing right now, we basically assume none.
That's a fair assumption if all you've got is two clogged up old storm drains. It doesn't necessarily address the idea that there's a whole lot of impervious coverage out on this lot that has never been engineered or designed for stormwater. And I don't know that I don't know anything about how it's functioned because we don't have an evaluation of it or a peer review of it. At any rate, I guess I've shared my thoughts on that. I'll open it up for other planning board members to share their view of stormwater or anything else on the site. Nelson?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I completely agree with your recollection of the last meeting and the discussions we had earlier, that we were expecting a stormwater analysis for the site and not just the small changes. I will say in addition to that, that the Lower Merrimack River Local Advisory Committee got to review this plan also, and their recommendation was minimum was to remove the impervious surface that's in the 50-foot lane. At least bring the 50-foot surface back to the 50-foot line from the river. And so I personally would not be in favor of voting in favor of this until we have it on an agreement to do that.
Just to speak
So
to that,
do we
we
have
have so I just speak to that, so obviously I was there at the LAC meeting.
Sure
Yeah,
you
so
were.
it was tough to see, so I actually have a board with me showing the existing edge of pavement in the 50-foot, you know, line from the buffer from the river shown, and you can see how there's no pavement. I can pull it up, actually, I can show you, it's easier to see, it was hard to see on the presentation last week. So I can show you that condition of exactly where that existing edge of pavement is in relation to
do.
that 50-foot buffer.
Please do.
Sure.
Which sheet should I look at while you're pulling it up? Hmm? That's a good spot right there.
I'll spot a little louder so you can hear me in the mic. But
Mark, can you make it, or can you see it, or do you want to pull it back about a foot? Yeah, that's pretty good right there.
See that? So shown here is here's the river.
Hang on, get the microphone in your hand so that the
No,
folks,
behind you.
Right here.
Behind
Yeah,
you.
no one?
yes, Eli's got it.
I'm not sure that's,
Is that working? Can you guys hear that or no?
I can't, but
The light is on.
that's on.
All set? Okay.
Yes.
Now you
Thank
can.
you. All right, so this graphics is the same plan that you've seen, but basically what we're showing is here's the, obviously Merrimack River. This is the existing tree line, so we basically showed the existing vegetative buffer that's there now in green. This blue line is the 50-foot shoreline setback from the river, and the red line is the existing edge of pavement, which we're not increasing the pavement closer to the river or the buffer. So the only spot that you're referring to is this little section right here where there's some existing pavement within the 50-foot buffer. So that's where it's limited just there.
I thought there was more than that, but
It was tough to see, no, that's why I brought this, because I knew we were gonna discuss it. So this shows it clearer. Before it was tough to see when it's just black and white.
Thank you.
Is there some pages in our package that we could look at to see some, I know it's not color like that, but, and the reason why I was, looking for it is that the line next to the river seems to be I don't know, I mean, just gauging it by sight, there's a 50-foot setback on the left sideline on page C201, which seems to be about twice as far as that line from the river is.
I can turn to that page, hold on.
C201 is the page that I happen to,
That's the demo plan. It also should be able to see it here on 301.
okay,
What page, please?
301?
301.
Okay. So on the left boundary, the southern boundary, there's a minimum 50-foot front building setback shown. And the distance from the sideline to that 50-foot looks, on my page, about a half an inch. And the distance on the river for the 50-foot setback seems to be a lot less than that. Seems like it's quarter of an inch, 3/8 of an inch, very small.
I'm not sure if is it shown on this one, 301, the 50-foot building setback? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, I was just sort of comparing to try to get scale. There's like a 50-foot setback from the southern boundary on the land, not on the river. And then I'm looking to compare that to the 50-foot setback on the river.
Oh, this is right here?
Yeah, see that? Yeah, that's about an inch on your sheet, and I'm not seeing a line that's an inch away from the water. It seems to be
Right,
quite
this,
close.
this line right here. It's the same.
Okay.
This line right
Looks a
here is
lot
the line that
different. I'm sorry.
colors the 50-foot buffer from the Merrimack River.
So the boundary along the river on C301 is the line that's got a light line with dashed dark lines together?
Yes, you see it says waterfront buffer right here. It's the line right above it. That's the
Okay.
50-foot. And then we also show, obviously, for shoreline reasons, 150 and the 250.
And is that line, what are some of the DES terms for that? Is that the high water line of the river, or what establishes that boundary line that you have drawn there?
Reference line.
Yeah, I'm not
Call
sure.
it, and it's, I was looking at this week on another project, but it's.
Eli, make for sure your microphone's turned on.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's DES refers to it as the reference line in a river, and I believe it's, so obviously it's not when you flood and overflow the banks, but I think it's
No.
the standard line that the general
The
water
top of,
course
the top of
line.
bank, yeah. It's not the flood line. The flood line is shown here in a different line, but it's what they consider the top of bank.
Which one's the flood line?
That,
Oh, I think I see it.
see that right here? That's
Got a
the darker
single
line
dot.
has
Is
solid
single
and 3
dash.
dots, solid 3 dots.
I got
It's
you.
called out there. That's the 100-year flood.
Okay, that was my mistake. I was confusing that solid line with 3 dots as the edge of the water.
No, the
river.
50 foot's beyond that, further into the site.
Okay. So there's, the 15-foot conservation easement from the 100-year floodplain, just because why would you measure from anything else? All right, I'm sorry, my confusion. You are right. That does seem like 50 feet. And then the pavement that we're looking at is over towards the southern border.
Yep.
See it right here? It says it's EOP. It starts here. You see it? It's right here.
I got you.
Again, tough to see when we're in front of the LAC. I was trying to point it out, even on the screen, it's even harder to see. So that's again why I brought the colored. But
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you approximate how many square feet of pavement is within the 50-foot?
100 square feet. I mean, I'll call it right on here. It's right, just that. So
Fair.
we're talking about 50 feet by. So maybe it's 50 feet by an average of maybe 8 to 10. 10 at the furthest point. So less than 500. Somewhere
Okay.
between 250 and 500 probably.
Thank you, that helps me understand and evaluate the recommendation from the Lower Merrimack River Committee. Understood. Okay, so, other planning board members have comments about the plan in general, or where we stand with things? Lynn?
I'm concerned about the Merrimack River. We've been trying to clean this up for years. And if we've got runoff from this site that's been going into the river for many, many years, I'd like to stop it. So regardless of the fact that this has been in existence and it's doing that, but you're only looking at a small amount of the property. And I really don't want to see any of that going into the river.
I think that's kind of my thought too, but, anyone else
I
have
would
comments?
agree with you, Lynn.
So if there's no other comments for planning board members, procedurally, I think the staff has suggested that we have a drainage plan, even if we decide it's not compliant with our regulations or doesn't meet our standards, but we have one. And so we could consider the application complete and then have a discussion with the applicant about what we think of their whole application or what additional information might make it better at another meeting or something like that. But we have enough to at least accept it if that's the will of the board. So I'll leave that open for you guys. Consider.
I agree with that. If you do the drainage plan, you may find that you're not dumping stuff into the river, which would make me very, very happy. But I really would like to see what is going in.
So again, just because we're adding a deep sump-coated catch basin, a forebay, and a rain garden that's handling a lot of the impervious. Right now, there's nothing. So if Ward Senior decides to do nothing, you're stuck with no treatment whatsoever. And I think it's beyond the board's, as asking too much, to be honest with you. We're treating quite a bit of the runoff where now you're basically getting nothing. We're very limited with the infrastructure that's clogged and so forth. And they've provided I think we provided a good treatment practice here to provide, protection of the river.
So it is with respect to the new building, there's no question, but there's never been any engineering that deals with the runoff that's coming from all the rest of your impervious surface, because it's all, in essence, unpermitted construction. It was never permitted by a site plan, it was never permitted to be built there, and so there is no engineering around all of the rest of the pavement other than the building.
And we're providing treatment for the whole big parking lot in front also, not just the building, but the whole parking lot in front. All gets directed to this rain garden.
That's a small amount of the
Yeah, that's maybe,
property. Yeah.
To potentially distinguish terminology, though, between unpermitted, which sounds potentially violative of a statute, this is pre-existing non-conforming.
I think it probably fits in the former category. It may not be something that we've ever had an enforcement action to pursue, and I don't, not encouraging anybody to adopt one. I
Right.
don't want, that's not my approach to planning board approval. I think that we want to see people come into compliance. But all of the things that are on here are appearing for the first time ever on a site plan, and the site plan isn't engineered to deal with the drainage for the structures that are appearing on the site plan.
Not just the new ones, but the existing. There's nothing,
So you'd want the drainage design to be as if this was virgin ground, like there was nothing out there now, because that's basically what you're asking. So right now, say it was just all treed and all pervious, right? You're asking us to provide what is called a water quality volume for as if it's undeveloped.
Yes.
I mean, that's,
yes,
again, I think
Yes.
that's too much. I think actually to put a burden on the applicant, I believe that's beyond.
If this was a site where these old existing structures had gone through planning board review at any time, then they would be pre-existing and you'd be modifying an existing site. But what's happened here is because all of these things were constructed, I don't know when, without any particular review or approval, I call it 25 years ago, call it 30 years ago, whenever these things appeared, no drainage structures were ever built for them. There was no drainage analysis done. And to be here today saying, well, I'm only going to do drainage for the new part that I'm doing, allows you to bootstrap and benefit from prior sort of, like I said, unpermitted activity. And that would undermine all of our regulations if we allowed an applicant to sort of build whatever you want and then come back and add to it and say, well, you can't look at the old stuff because it's old. It's not old. It's the first time it's ever been on a plan that's been reviewed by anybody.
I understand that, but it's a redevelopment. It's not an existing virgin site. So you're asking the applicant to treat the stormwater as if it is, but it's not.
It's the same as any other building or construction project where you bring your site into compliance with whatever the current regulations are.
and it's not a redevelopment as far as we're concerned.
There's never been a
There's
development.
never been a
But
development there.
that's not what's out on the site now. It's obviously developed and we're actually reducing the impervious.
But all of the things that are developed out there never had any review or any
Right.
permitting done to them.
So as far as we're concerned, it's virgin ground.
If we were to treat it and say that this is pre-existing, that gives somebody a benefit from having acted improperly in building things without permits.
It was done before. I mean,
I mean,
don't-
yeah, it was a prior
Well, you know how
applicant,
old
but
this-
it's-
This was previously developed like 50 years ago, 60 years ago?
I don't mean to say it's the individuals who own it now. This
No.
thing could have changed hands 6 times between whoever did it in the beginning and who owns it now. It is what it is. I mean, you own what you own. It didn't have permits when it was built.
Yeah.
Or
Well,
it
I
didn't
mean,
have
I-
site plan review. Actually, I can't speak to
And the
permits. I
drainage
can't
wasn't looked at.
Permit. It doesn't have site plan.
No, yeah, back 6 years ago, no one looked
Right.
at stormwater.
Right.
So, I mean, again, we had this conversation with Fussinelli, your peer reviewer, and they're in agreement with what we provided in our calculations. And we had a conversation with them on, on how much water quality treatment would be, and they agreed that, it'd be unrealistic, and check with them, to ask us to meet the water quality on a virgin, totally pervious site. And I understand, obviously, you're trying to protect the river, but I'm saying if, this is actually, it would be tough for him, I mean, it's a large expense, and if they walk away and do nothing, your treatment, you're not getting any treatment,
Understood.
Yep.
Yeah.
so.
So it's absolutely up to the planning board to decide whether they're going to hold you, fully to compliance with the regulations, or if you want to make an argument for a waiver of some of the regulations. I don't know what the reception for that will be, but the other option is remove all of that other impervious surface that's never been permitted, and I'm not saying that, obviously that's a extreme expense. That's worse than doing the water, but if you don't want to do the drainage analysis and work related to that impervious surface, then take it away.
So your code's very vague when it talks about stormwater, so I'd argue we're actually meeting your requirement. You don't speak to, you don't have that language in there talking about treating the whole thing. I mean, your code is very, very vague.
I appreciate it. We get
So-
to interpret what we think it means, and if we're wrong, I guess you could appeal it.
Just as another point of reference relating to the title of this property, that before it was sold to the Foots 22 years ago, it was owned by the town. So there have been opportunities to bring this into compliance with whatever regulations the town at any given time wanted here. And then obviously I come to you with the challenge here that this is one resident of the town trying to do the right thing, coming before this board, trying to improve a site for use of his building, add improvements and add to your tax base here. I do, plead with you to think about what the limit is here, where this is obviously not virgin ground. The municipality has owned this previously. To then beat a different standard out of this applicant is a pretty heavy lift.
Yep. So that's an important fact that the town owned it, and I want to think through that and hear the conversations among the board members to decide if that means something. Certainly, I know in real estate practice, the first thing that you do when you buy a site is you see whether it's got valid permits for the things that are built on it. I mean, that's part of the due diligence when you buy a thing, and that will show up in the record no matter who owned the thing in the past. For all I know, I don't know how the town came to own it. If they took it as a tax deed, they didn't bless or approve or adopt the existence of the structures or the legality of the structures as we're there. And I don't know how they took it. So
Sure, and again, I don't have all that information in front of me at the moment, but yes, the town would not have taken subject to certain things when it had that, but in selling that, it certainly had the opportunity to deed restrict or put conditions that do these things. So what was done from town hall at that point?
the town hall doesn't conduct a planning board review of a parcel that it's about to sell to decide what it is and how to treat it. It's like any other tax parcel. Taken, it's auctioned.
When,
You take what you bought, what you get.
when was the impervious surface put on? Was it done by the town, or when the town owned it, or when Footer owned it?
Yeah, I don't,
Existing.
Yeah, it was-
I don't know, it's been existing for years.
yeah, I'm not sure who, developed the site originally. Again, it was, well, like I said, I think it's 50, 60 years ago.
My guess is it was
Yeah.
Footer, but I don't know that for a fact.
We've been there 22 years, and we've done zero.
Understood. I don't think that you
Yeah.
created this.
Yeah, no,
I get it. I don't think for a second that you created it. If we, I don't know how to approach it any differently within our regulations. As I look at it, we don't have a prior plan to build off of to say these things were approved under a standard in 1951, 1971, 1991. We didn't have a standard in 1951, but it's never been approved as an existing site. At least I don't have any evidence that it existed before we had planning board review in town. When was that, 65?
That's when planning board started, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, if you were showing me that that this impervious surface was there in 1965 or earlier, I don't know. That's what it would take for it to be, you know, pre-existing non-conforming, is for it to exist before planning board review existed. But otherwise, we've got a site with impervious surface on it without the drainage necessary to accommodate the impervious surface that it has. And it sits obviously right on a very sensitive water body.
Mhm.
It isn't even like it's a matter of, you know, some of your runoff running onto your neighbor's property, it's going, you know, right into the river. Anyway, other comments by anybody that hasn't spoken, or Mark?
I think you
Yeah,
said
more
it.
of a question from an engineering standpoint, the impervious material that's out there now, to add drainage to it and tie it into your proposed along the side, where would you do that? What would that take?
I'd have to look at, I mean, we're tough, I mean, they're trying to keep a lot of the impervious for, you know, what they use now for, you know, for storage, right, for the stone. And then we have limited space on where we can put another rain garden or treatment facility because of the operations. And also, we don't want to go anywhere close to the buffer. So we actually have limited areas to do it. We fit it in, basically the only area we had, you know, just hadn't worked out that we treated it as a redevelopment. So I'd have to go back and look at potential what areas we could, but
So your options are to add drainage where you can, or potentially remove some of the impervious
we'd have to do
material.
both. I mean,
Or a
to add it,
combination of
to add the
both.
treatment, would have to remove impervious to make room for that treatment. So it's not like, there'd be incurred cost for them to remove concrete or asphalt, you know, and to also put a larger, you know, another rain garden in.
And do you not have an existing plan here? Existing conditions, overall plan?
That's been submitted. I don't think I brought it with me, but, it's been submitted as part of the package.
The
No.
demolition plan is kind of,
We
kind of,
submitted by
right?
Keach and Nordstrom, did the existing conditions, probably was back at our first submission. I didn't submit it again, because you previously had it, and there was no changes. It was back, you know, the original submission had, it's a one-page existing conditions plan.
Robert, do you have that original submission with you?
he's looking.
Does anyone have any other comments while Robert's looking for that plan? If not, the question that could be before the board, if it's the will of the board, is whether we find the application complete and then continue this discussion, or whether we believe that the situation with the drainage or anything else would leave us short of being able to find it complete.
I think we can find it complete, as long as we can resolve this drainage question.
I think, my opinion is that we could find it complete and still attack this drainage question and have a hearty debate and be persuaded by the applicant to do whatever and go wherever we need to go. Even though we found it complete, I don't think that necessarily adopts the drainage plan as being compliant.
Right.
Just to find it complete.
I'd go along with that. I'd go along with that.
Is there a motion to find the application complete?
I'll make that as a motion.
Is there a second? Second by
No,
Tom.
I'm not seconding it. I have a question.
Okay, let's do the second.
I'll second
And now,
Lynn's
question.
motion.
So obviously, I haven't reviewed this or been involved in any of the past discussions. And so as I was looking through this letter from Robert, it seemed like there were a tremendous amount of open issues or things that needed to be done still. Recommendations and or requirements from different departments and whatnot. I guess I was shocked to see all that and think that the thing was complete, that there's so much that hasn't been answered yet. Am I misunderstanding the status of this?
I don't think you're misunderstanding the status of it. I think that, and maybe Robert can address some of the staff's comments substantively as to what they entail and whether those are the kinds of things that are typically adopted as conditions of approval to, respond to feedback from certain departments and things. It has become, I don't know if it has become or it's sort of always been, an inclusion of a bunch of conditions of approval that are in.
Well,
the approval
and I've
letter.
seen that before, but as I was reading through this, it just seemed like an overabundance of conditions or recommendations or comments from Fuss and O'Neill or whatnot that hadn't been responded to yet, or.
Robert, do you have thoughts about that point?
In speaking with Casey as she was preparing this, it sounds, some of this may have been addressed in some of the plan revisions, and I think another plan revision was just submitted Thursday or Friday of last week, but staff hasn't had a chance to review that yet. This is what she came up with the first plan set was submitted a couple of months ago. I believe the applicant, correct me if I'm wrong, has spent a lot of time working on Fuss and O'Neill commentary. I don't know specifically.
We addressed all the other comments.
Everything else?
and All the
All
other
right.
departments have already been addressed. They were addressed before last hearing.
Okay, so to this point, I mean, what I know from Casey is at least several of her comments were still outstanding, but that's not uncommon. And if they've submitted the revisions that they just did last week and they've been addressed, then as we go through it, it'll certainly check them off. But it's not uncommon to see a significant number of comments like this, especially when they are potentially minor and they can be handled by staff.
My impression is that staff can handle those things. You don't need to have us involved with it. Staff is perfectly capable of dealing with those conditions and dealing with it.
And just to speak to that, I mean, we did address, last time I said before last hearing, we revised the plans and addressed all those comments, and we never got any comments back, and she put them in this, the memo. They've already been all addressed. The only thing that the latest plans that we submitted last week addressed was the second round of Fuss and O'Neill's comments.
Yeah, and I think that can be handled by staff without a problem. So I have no problem with.
And I'm not
Treating
suggesting
it
it
as
couldn't be
complete,
handled,
yeah.
but this being all that I saw, it
Yeah.
was difficult
Fair.
to try and suggest that
Yeah.
you had agreed to them, and you have said nothing since you came here that you had agreed to them until just now.
Yeah, we agreed to
so-
all those comments, and like I
Okay.
said,
So-
have addressed them. The plans are already updated, incorporated.
And you haven't talked about any of your waiver requests yet, which I guess is inappropriate at this point.
Once we determine whether the application's complete, if that's
we
the
can do that.
successful vote, then they would raise their waivers and discuss them. For me, as I review these, and I didn't go down the list with a ton of scrutiny into the specific comments by the staff, but in general, when I see things as I open up the page and say, sheet C301 has an incorrect scale, sheet C301 has a typo, those sorts of things, it's complete because they gave us a plan. Now, in our review, we determine whether the plan has all of the right ingredients and pieces in it to pass, to get a final approval.
Yeah.
So that's how I've always approached it, is I may not love your lighting plan, but you have one, and so you're complete,
Yeah.
and we can discuss it later.
Yeah.
Right, that's the way I've always approached it, but, that's just one
No, I
one
agree.
fellow's opinion, right? Okay, there is a motion and a second to find the application complete. Is there any other discussion? And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? One opposed? 410 to find the application complete. Okay. With that in mind, do you want to speak to your waivers?
Sure. We've only added one, I believe. Robert, you said 6. I believe we have 5 waivers. We've added one since last time, which came up based on doing the stormwater design.
Okay, speak to all of them, even the ones
Sure.
that you have.
Yep, so speak back to them. The first one was the idea of the number of parking spaces, we're asking for a waiver, reducing that. As I mentioned last time, I believe we're showing, see here, I believe showing 9 spaces. I think the requirement based on the square footage is 17. As I mentioned before, there's no retail component to this. It's just for the employees. So 9, we park just the front, that's more than they need. There's no customers coming in and out. So that was that waiver. Second waiver was the no landscaping provided for the parking area. And again, we're basically stating that again, that the view of this, there's no aesthetics need for it based on the neighborhood, and then also aesthetically from the river, the buffer's there, you can't even see the site. So we spoke to, again, that would just be, so that's the reason why we're asking for that waiver. And again, as most of the site is, impervious, but to not know, we are removing some additional, up in the top left, some pavement and loaming and seeding that area. And now we have actually added landscaping in the bio retention area or rain garden, so we actually have added some landscaping. So there's plantings in there. So that's the third waiver that we have listed here. Just again, the overall landscaping plan. The fourth waiver, trees larger than 15 inches in diameter have not been called out. We didn't see a need for that because we're not cutting a single tree. So we're not removing a single tree, so we didn't see a need for that. We're not removing even any scrub brush. Again, we're not, everything that's on that buffer, all the trees and vegetation, we're not touching it. And the new waiver we added was for, there's one section of pipe that has less than 36 inches of cover. We talked with Fuss and Nail on this, and they suggested requesting the waiver. The pipe is ADS or HDPE, doesn't require 36 inches of cover. We have the required cover over it per manufacturer's recommendation. To be able to meet that cover, would have to artificially raise the site in that corner where that catch basin is. I can show you where it is, which then would be impacting that buffer that's on, closer to the river. You'd be actually grading along that edge of pavement. So we didn't think that made sense. So that's the way to do it. The only other way to do it would be push down the rain garden to make sure, again, because you got to obviously gravity from that catch basin to the rain garden. By digging the rain garden deeper, then you actually can't have that under drain, doesn't work. The under drain right now, we have it tied out to the existing 12-inch drainage pipe. If we can't tie into there, you'd have to actually outlet in the bank.
But your cover does actually meet what the manufacturer's requirement was.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that's
Can you
why-
point it out on the plan where
Sure.
where that's located?
Yep. So on sheet 402, you can see
Mike,
both, but 402.
Keith, grab the mic,
Yep.
please.
Thank you, sorry. On sheet C402, the catch basin I'm referring to, that catches all the runoff from the front of the buildings. This parking area is right here. So we have less than the 3 feet of cover here. So to be able to get that, either you gotta, push this rain garden depth down, because again, you have to be able to drain it there by gravity. By doing that, this is the under drain that connects into this existing 12-inch pipe. If you push that down, we can't make that connection. So then you'd have to daylight it somewhere. You'd be daylighting it in the bank, closer to the river, which is disturbance. So we didn't want to do that. The other thing to do is here, you could obviously raise the rim here, right? To raise the rim here, this is all pitching here. You'd have to raise the building more. You'd also have to raise the grade here, which again is close to the buffer area. So again, you're having disturbance where our limit of work's right here. You're disturbing ground closer to the river.
All of that makes sense to me. Show me how far the pipe is less than 36 inches?
It's a section about here.
Just half of that one
Yeah,
leg?
Yeah.
Okay.
And what is the cover over it?
It's 2.5, I believe. I didn't bring that with me, but
2.5, so 30 inches
Yeah.
instead of 36?
yeah, I can double check that. I can double check and look at the plan, but
Yeah. Certainly, if you get a chance to peek and get a precise number, that would be helpful. But generally speaking, that waiver seems to make sense to me. Actually, I don't have any objections to any of the waivers that they've requested. I think that they happen to break a little funny in that some of them fall under one criteria in the statute and some under a different one.
Just to that new waiver, staff did speak with Public Works to get their input on it today. They just had 2 comments, questions, concerns. One, just the concern that pipes could get crushed by vehicles if they're not deep enough under the ground. So basically, they want to know if vehicles are going to be traveling over those pipes. And 2, they were concerned, obviously, if they're not deep enough, that they could freeze. That's just basically
I
it.
didn't hear you, Bob.
Freezing and
Freezing.
crushing
Oh.
were their concerns.
Both valid concerns. But it didn't look like they were where traffic was gonna run.
Or, very corner of the potential parking lot.
so further down, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
The truck route is kind of through here. It's not in this area, it's through here where it gets deeper. The shallowest part is, there's no traffic where the shallow part is. But as obviously we have this pipe gets deeper as you go here, and that's where there is some traffic there.
Thank you for that. And the difference between 30 and 36 isn't a huge amount of difference in the cover. If it turns out it is 30 inches, obviously if it was 12 inches, that might be different, but
Yep.
at 30 inches, it seems covered. Discussion by members of the board regarding the other waiver requests, individually or in general?
I don't have any problem with any of them.
I have no problem with any of these that are requested.
I think that some of them are, under the strict conformity would be an unnecessary hardship, and other ones, specific circumstances,
Peculiar to the site.
yeah, like the no landscape plan
Yeah.
is the second
Yeah.
one, and no landscape provided is also the second one. The other ones, I think, are all the first one, strict conformity. What is the will of the board with respect to the waiver requests?
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion to approve these requests for waiver as submitted in this letter of Mr. Curran on March 29th.
And the additional waiver request today?
That's actually in that
With the
letter.
stamp.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the staff's analysis letter instead of Mr. Curran's letter.
But this does not include a waiver on the overall impervious
That's
surface.
Jason.
The overall drainage plan, which,
Here you go. So all 5 of your waivers are outlined in your letter. So Nelson, does your motion rely on the first or second statutory criteria, or a combination of them both, or?
Combination.
be a combination.
Okay. Robert, do you need any more specificity as to which one applies to which?
No, I can wordsmith that.
Okay. Is there a second for Nelson's motion to grant the waivers based on both statutory criteria? Mark seconds. If there's no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Any abstaining? 5-0-0 to grant the waivers. Is there any abutter or citizen who wishes to weigh in on the application? Only one here is the one that belongs to the applicant. So close the public hearing. So let's finish our discussion about stormwater and decide who's gonna persuade who.
Just another thing I want to know in the stormwater. So a lot of times what's required is, you're looking for quantity and quality, right? So we were talking about the quality, which is the treatment. Quantity is the runoff. So a lot of times, obviously, what you're looking at is you're making sure in the post-development that your runoff leaving the site in certain storms, 2, 10, 25, 50, is less, right? So in this case, all of the whole site goes to the river, but we're still meeting that. Since we're reducing the impervious, and we've showed in the drainage report, we have less runoff coming off the site in the proposed than in the existing. So that part of the stormwater regulations, if you want to say, is being totally met. So what we were talking about was the quality part of it, where we were discussing earlier.
I understand what you're saying in terms of the comparison between what you're viewing as existing versus post-development. I think that difference in opinion about what is existing and what isn't is where the source of the discussion comes from, because none of the structures on here exist on a approved plan that's been engineered. So that's why we're looking at a comparison between undeveloped site and fully developed site in terms of that. And if your analysis, supported by Fuss and O'Neill's review, says that the site currently would run off less than it would as an undeveloped site, I'd accept that, but I don't know that because there's no analysis.
Yeah, that's not the analysis. Yeah, so to do that, if you again were running the existing as a virgin site, and to say you put it all as grass, not only would have to introduce a stormwater detention or infiltration system, never mind just the rain gardens. So again, another hardship on where that would go. You'd have to remove impervious, just where, they utilize now on the site for storage areas. So that would restrict their storage areas. So yeah, so that, again, when we compared pre versus post, is actually what's out there now.
Yeah, I think that's the nub of the debate that we're having, and I know that your applicant and would look at that as a hardship because it's an expense to build something he doesn't want to build. But that's the nature of every regulation. It's whether it's an unnecessary hardship is where he would get some relief from the regulation, and if it's to protect the environment or to deal with the runoff properly, it's not about being necessary or unnecessary. Would clearly be necessary. I mean, otherwise we'd be on any site deciding to set aside parts of our regulations and say, well, not today.
Robert?
Oh, Robert?
Yep.
Sorry.
So just to add a little bit more food for thought for this discussion, I did talk to Dawn about this. And she basically said that despite the existing drainage pattern sheet flowing into the river today, she basically is looking at this, if the site is stable and not showing any active signs of erosion, then they may have sufficient treatment with what they're proposing now, as much as the board may not agree with it and want the entire site to be treated. But the only way to really know that would be to have them demonstrate the stability of the site, and in order to do that, they'd have to invite staff on to at least look and verify that there's no sediment running off and going anywhere into the river. In addition to that, Dawn's also taking into consideration the fact that the town does not own any MS4s in that area. Everything's all private, so it's not going into a town system. Also the fact that there is a roughly 50-foot at least treed buffer separating the development portion of the site and the river, so there is some treatment going on naturally there as well. But again, all of that said, the board certainly has the right to ask the applicant to do whatever the board feels is appropriate.
Thanks, Rob. Just to add that, so as you mentioned, like right now, existing in the areas that we're not treating, there's that buffer that's like 30 feet, 50 feet of vegetated that's, fully grown. That treats the stormwater as it sheets off, right? 'Cause there's no concentrated flow. It sheets off the impervious areas, and it's being treated in that vegetative buffer before it makes it to the river. So again, with us not touching, we're not touching that at all.
I had
So, and just go back to the other thing, again, we walked the whole edge of the river and so forth, and the outfall that's there. There's no erosion going on, whatever, it's all vegetated, there's no sediment making it up from the site, or even erosion along the bank going into the river.
So I had the benefit of Dawn's advice earlier in the day, and had a chance to think it through a little bit. And it is important advice from the town's engineer to take into account. As a planning board member, a planning board chair, a very subjective review from the town's engineer that's based on, we don't have any town-owned drainage structures, and there's some tree lines which could do some good things, but we didn't really study what it does. And if we were to take that kind of an approach to a site plan review, we would literally do that on every site, anywhere in town. For somebody says, I don't really want to build any drainage, but let me tell you about my trees and see if I can talk Dawn into it. And you don't have any town-owned water systems here, so what do you care? And I know that I'm being a little snarky about the way that I said that, but it's
Yes.
But that's essentially what it comes down to. Can we create an exception on this site based on a whole bunch of subjective things that we really don't have any data on, or sort of just visual thoughts and opinions? I think that would leave us with setting a precedent for other applicants to
Yes.
really come forward and ask us to set aside whatever part of the regulation they didn't like, whether it's a lighting plan or a parking plan or whatever. Now, we do have a waiver process, and you could ask for a waiver of things, but it would have to fit the waiver criteria and persuade the board that it warranted a vote for a waiver. And that's the way we do treat someone when they don't want to do a lighting plan or they don't want to do a landscape plan, as you have. But to my knowledge, I don't think that we've ever approached a site saying, some drainage is better than all the drainage that the regulation would require. So although I appreciate Dawn's view, I really struggled with how, as a planning board member, I could consistently apply that kind of an approach.
Mr. Chairman, and again, with the utmost respect, because I appreciate the way this board considers each of these applications, if I'm thinking about the precedent that this sets, this is a site that you've seen in its general shape it's in work, and I realize we don't have the engineering data to show you what exactly it's doing. I admit that. But the precedent we risk setting here is that you have an opportunity to have a landowner and a business in town do something to improve this site from what currently exists. And I feel like the precedent that we start setting here is that Merrimack's not open for business on this, is that he is trying to do right by the town. We have been to 4 meetings in what seems like a relatively straightforward site and site plan review. And we'll go back to a 5th meeting with multiple sets, the amount of emails that went back and forth between our side and Fuss and O'Neill, because we are trying to do the right thing with developing this rain garden and improving the site. I believe we talked about it last time that several of you, I think, have been to this site. You have seen this. You don't see that it's a crumbling edge down to the river where some contaminant's going. I realize certainly he's an engineer. I don't know which else of you might be professional engineers. It's hard to look at something and say, yes, I'm an engineer, therefore I know this thing, which I am not. But we're at a spot where we're really cutting this very fine with a spot where we are doing something to improve this. We're adding the rain garden, but the more space we take up on something that conceivably was paved by the town 60 years ago, and I'd love to see the site aerials, etc., but we're really adding a hardship here. The site works and we are improving it. So there's the argument of perfect being the enemy of good here, and I think we're running into a spot where that does create the hardship for my client.
So I get the argument. I understand, the points that you're trying to make. That and there is certainly a concept that is in more in the variance world than in the planning board world that talks about a site being less non-conforming. But that isn't what we're dealing with here. We've got a bunch of development that it might have come from the town, but I don't know that, and I don't know that the town ever had any development or reason to have, a industrial site on the river, unless it took it for taxes or something. It certainly didn't function as the town garage or something like that, where they paved it or put it there, at least to my knowledge. If you have facts that say otherwise and that this was there in the 50s, I think I'd have to take that into account, and maybe that would change my opinion. But the assertion that the site works is, I get that's the view from your applicant to put forward, but there isn't any evidence that it works.
If it was developed before site plan regulations went in effect, then is it an existing non-conforming site then? So if we can show historical data that it was developed impervious before there was even a Merrimack Planning Board, is that an existing non-conforming?
If you showed that all of this impervious surface existed before 1965, that would be your argument, that it was pre-existing planning board review, and I would not be able to sit here and say that it was built without planning board review because it never needed it. Now, I don't know when this stuff was built. I honestly don't. If you do, then put the evidence before us. In terms of the review of the site, I've been the chair of the board for 15 years and Nelson for 40 before that. I don't think this is a simple site. I don't think this is a simple review. I think between us, we've reviewed some pretty complex sites around town, from, some unofficial landfills and some gravel pits and some shopping malls and a lot of complex stuff. And although this is a small site and you're only doing a small building on it, it's next to a very sensitive river, and it's got a bunch of development on it that nobody really can define, and nobody really knows what the drainage is doing. And whatever lands on the ground there from anywhere else, any truck or whatever else, is heading for the river. Whether that's road salt that washes off of vehicles, or salt that you spread because you're trying to keep things from freezing, or oil drips from a vehicle, or whatever else. Without any treatment plants going in the river. And that's what our regulations are intended to prevent. And so I don't feel like we're on any thin, slicing things thin to say that's why I want to apply our regulations. That's my view. I know you disagree, but persuade other planning board members to change votes, or let's figure out what the plan going forward is for how we get to where we can either approve something, or we vote to deny it and you can appeal, and if an appeal tells us we're wrong, then we'll all learn from that.
Dawn is an engineer, and so I do give some credence to her, not official statements, but at least an opinion And I think we could use that to influence some of the things that we're talking about and doing. That could be included in part of that.
Sure, and the review, obviously, Fuss and O'Neill is engineers also, and I am.
That's
So
correct,
they
yep.
reviewed it and, and improved what we did, and they're also an engineer.
Yep.
So-
Right, but they're not answering the question that I want answered, which is,
Yep.
does this site
Yep.
function better than it did when it was undeveloped? You're talking about, I agree with you 1,000%. I'm not questioning you for a second that it functions better than it did, or I was gonna say 2 months ago, but I know that this building isn't there yet. But, tomorrow, when this building is built, it'll function better than it does today. But that doesn't mean that it functions correctly compared to the way stormwater should be treated when there's impervious surface constructed on it. Does anybody else have any comments? I'm sort of dominating all the chatter.
I think you've said it very well from my point of view. I agree with what you've been saying.
Thanks. How would you guys like to proceed with the applicant? We could continue it for some purpose that we'd have to explain to the applicant that we're continuing it for. We could approve it with conditions. We could deny it with deny it with explanations and findings. Let's let them have their conversation so we can find out what their thoughts are. I mean, I don't want to deny it if there's an opportunity for the applicant to provide some information that could change our view on things, either by adding some drainage structures or.
Can I ask
something.
some additional questions off of this topic for a few minutes? They have access doors to this manufacturing area, but I don't see any pavement or roadway or anything for vehicles to get in or out, or there's no, there's very little on here as far as what's planning to be there. I mean, I see a parking lot, which is a square out in the middle of an open space, and there's no access to it, and there's.
It takes a while to figure out.
I'm
It's there.
missing something,
Yeah.
and I just,
Yeah.
I'm curious.
And their entrance is through an adjacent property.
I get that. That's the only way they could possibly get there.
That's the only way they get there, that's
But I
right.
don't see it on this chart anywhere.
So that point is, we provided and we submitted, there's an access easement that gives them access through that abutting property.
Right.
And there's existing surfaces, gravel on one side and concrete on the other side of those two doors you're talking about on the side. So there's already a hard surface there, so we're not adding new pavement there.
No, but you're using stuff that was there that was never planned or engineered, which is what Bob's been talking about this whole evening. That there's material there that,
Correct, yes. The point is that I just answered your question about the access to the doors, right? To be able to
Right.
get inside the building through those large overhead doors, there's gravel on one side and concrete on the other side.
but isn't
Which
there
one?
some way that you're getting from your border on the left side, as I look at this, or the south side, to your building? There's nothing shown in here as your access through here. But have you done any drainage or concerned about that roadway or that driveway or that?
No, we talk about the drainage, and I provided plans showing fire access, we provided plans showing where the trucks coming in will go, and how, the routes that they have and the surface that they're on. So again, you're going back to the drainage questions that we talked about, but the point I'm getting at is there's access to all those doors on hard surfaces, the existing hard surfaces on the sides.
But they're not supposed to be there.
Yeah,
Are
yeah,
you've
we'll go
added
back.
that into your drainage, that area that they're gonna use?
Yes, so again, when we did the drainage analysis, we did as it is, the existing conditions was done as it is out there today, not virgin, not impervious site.
Okay. I still don't understand how they get from this side to your building.
Yeah, your traffic pattern, you had a plan last time that showed us at least where the vehicles were supposed to
It shows a
go.
loop road there, it goes in and turns around, yeah.
Sure, so again, the access to the, like I said here, we have an access easement, right?
Yep.
You're gonna have to
Yep.
move your mic, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. This existing access easement, we provided those easement documents through the site. This was subdivided off, and with that, there was an access easement, so that's how they access the site in front of this existing building that abuts. It's paved now, so we're not adding that, they're just using the existing pavement that's there now, and then people that are coming here to work just are using that, and then they just pull up and park here. The truck traffic that's out there, meaning, bringing the stone and so forth, they're gonna do the same thing they do today. again, they come in through here, they're using that existing pavement.
Slow down a minute.
Yep,
There's nothing going on out there today,
of course there is.
according to the plans.
No, there's
Nothing
no building,
engineered,
there's no
nothing.
building. They haven't touched the ground, but there's stone that they have, if you went out there, there's stone that they lay down on grates or whatever that are on these impervious surfaces. So but there's no structure, they put a shovel in the ground, they're just utilizing the existing impervious surfaces.
To store material.
To store material, which is just basically stone, like granite stone, slabs of stone. Yep,
There's stored material there now.
The company that's planning to build this building
Yes.
is?
yep. And they have the right to do that. The point is, they're not disturbing anything. So in other words, they're just utilizing the existing impervious that's there now as an outside storage for their stone slabs. So the point is that the trucks come in now and they unload these slabs, right? And the process is going to be the same. Point is now that these slabs are gonna go inside the building to be processed, cut and cleaned and polished and so forth. That's the only difference. That we're looking just to add this 8,500 square foot building.
But to Tom's point, everything from the southern boundary to the building is paved except for a little bit of grass that's going to be cut towards the
This is all
western boundary.
Yeah, I can show you. Hold on, I have an area plan. So this was similar to the figure you saw before. I'm just showing in blue the 50 foot, right? And here's the river, and you can see all the existing. I just brought this to show you that nice existing buffer that's there now between the existing edge of pavement and the river. So you can see this is it's all impervious already. So this is gravel over here, but this is all concrete here, and this is all paved. So they now, come in here and unload the stone, and they have it stored on these areas, and they turn around here and come right back out. We're not changing the operation at all. That's what they're doing now. We're just looking to add the building and the parking, and improving the stormwater. So as it is now, it's being used just as external storage yard.
And I don't know, how many acres is the whole site?
5.85, I believe.
And there's got to be 3.5 acres of pavement on it.
I
Or
have that. I have
impervious.
that number somewhere too. It's actually
There's
on
a
this
lot of
plan.
pavement.
It's on it's on this 301. Talks about the existing impervious.
301? What does it say, the existing
60,
impervious?
about 60%.
Yeah.
My eyesight's not going. Is at 68%, but 148,000 square feet.
Yeah, there's a lot of pavement.
58%.
Yeah, so that's a little over 3 acres. And it's going to be 6,000 square feet less when it's finished?
Yes, impervious. Correct.
So that's a reduction of 2.1%. And I get that that's an improvement because 2.1% is less, but there's still just a massive amount of, if this came to us at a planning board as a virgin site saying, I'd like to pave 3 acres of it and to build this building, we wouldn't even be thinking about accepting the amount of drainage you put into that, right?
Well, the drainage design would be different. Like I said, would have to handle the runoff going. Like if you treat this as virgin pervious, you'd have infiltration basin, subsurface, or grade or detention basin. So therefore, there would be more runoff going to the river than there is today. But again, as I'm looking as an engineer, that's not the condition. So you have runoff coming off the site now, and the proposed condition is less going to the river.
Yep.
So.
Except that there's 3 acres of pavement there that's never been engineered. So let's get your input as well on how you'd like the board to proceed. We could, as I had mentioned, we could continue this to a future meeting if there's some information or some changes or some reflection based on our feedback that you'd like to do that might bring us a different plan. Or we could vote up or down, whichever way the will of the board is here tonight, and you take it as you have it. Do you have a preference for a course of action?
Yeah, I think we do have a preference, and I don't think we're ready to have the board vote tonight because I do think, your sense is that maybe we'll come back with an improved plan, I also want to see what we can find on aerial photography, et cetera, about when this was done, so that we can get you some more conclusive information on that to decide if the applicant needs to spend more money on engineering.
That would be helpful.
So I think a review of the permit file, because one of the other things that we keep discussing is that this is here, this was never approved per what we've seen. But again, Robert, there's no indication of any violations or anything here either, right?
Correct. The town has not enforced any violation or of any kind.
It's just an empty file, just for our records.
That's as far as I know. I haven't gone that deep, but I know we are not actively going after anything right now.
Yeah, and I don't think right now is even really my question, but again, if at most points in time, once you have planning, if someone paves 3 acres, someone notices regarding permits.
Not where it is.
It's a little hard sight to see,
And you don't
Yeah.
require landscaping because nobody can see it, right?
right? Can't see it from the river, can't see it from the street. I mean,
I think that's a good approach.
Okay. When are the next, would you say 16?
there's one in 2 weeks, and there's one 2 more weeks after that, essentially.
Yeah, so it's a 5 Tuesday month, so the next one would be May 7th.
So yeah, April 16th or May 7th.
I'm gonna grab my
and in
calendar
your-
real quickly. if
Yeah,
that's okay.
absolutely. In your research, in addition to aerial photographs of what might existed before 1965, if you can show that the town built this or the town paved it, I would eat that sandwich too.
Yep.
Reluctantly, but
Well,
I don't think the
no,
town built it.
that's
I don't think so either. But if you can show me that it did,
But it may have been built before the town acquired it. And I think that's the thing that we're interested in finding out.
if it was before 1965, I mean, if the town took it, I don't know why the town ever owned it. If they took it as a tax deed parcel, then they didn't investigate what it is or improve it or own it or bless it. So anyway, I don't know. But, find out whatever you think that you can for why we ought to treat it differently.
Yeah.
Couple of weeks or?
Yeah, the 16th.
16th? Okay.
Okay.
And then I suppose if there's just all I find is that this was done in 1996, we may need a continuance. But
Yes.
If you find that, then yeah, I think obviously it depends on which board members we have on a particular night way a vote might shake out, but I think that you probably ought to add some drainage features into the plan if you find that this all came to existence in the 90s or something.
hypothetically.
Hypothetically.
This was
Right.
all Moses paved this.
Yes, a meteor struck the ground and melted it all into pavement. Okay, continuance to April 16th. Is there a motion to that effect?
Yes, I will make so.
With no further notice to abutters?
abutters.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Anyone, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstaining? 500. Thank you for, I know it's not a fun conversation on your end to get beat up by the board and kind of hear opinions that don't agree with yours, and you guys are treating it with respect and
Thank you.
best I can do, best you can do.
And we appreciate the consideration you put into this in this role, which is oftentimes thankless. So, thank you.
Thank you for that. I do approach all the projects that come before us trying to find a route to vote yes.
Yep.
And that doesn't stop here. If you can show me a route to vote yes, I'll do it.
Give it to us.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay. I have an agenda here that says workshop discussion,
Workshop.
potential amendments to the flood hazard conservation district section of the zoning ordinance. Robert, what do you got for me?
Sorry, I just had to switch over here. So basically what's in your packets, and unfortunately, as Nelson had pointed out to me, we did not print this one in color by mistake, so it's kind of difficult to see where all the changes are, so I apologize for that. What you're looking at is the flood hazard conservation district portion of the zoning ordinance. The state's Office of Planning and Development has reviewed, I'm guessing, every town's ordinances and provided feedback to each town about updates that need to be made in order to remain compliant with the National Flood Insurance Program. So what you're looking at here is essentially what the state provided for us as needed changes to our ordinance in order to maintain that compliance. The vast majority of it is clerical changes, like minor additions, clarity type of things, a couple of new definitions in there, one reworded entirely, updated terminology. It's things like that.
Sounds like a no-brainer.
Yeah, this is about as straightforward as a zoning amendment as could ever exist.
Yeah, as I pointed out to Robert earlier, I couldn't figure it out from this because the color is missing. And can you get us color copies?
Yes, absolutely, Nelson. I'll get you the actual source document so you can see it. But when we come back here for the public hearing, I'll absolutely make sure that we have colored versions in front of you.
Yeah, not just me, it's anybody who's reading this.
Well, of course,
and
yes.
if it could print any larger, it would help too. For folks like myself.
That I can live with, but I could not live with the color changes. I just couldn't figure it out what it was trying to say.
Yeah, I agree with both of those comments. I know that the Microsoft Word redlining feature draws a vertical line on the left margin when there's a change in that general area of the document, but even then, it's kind of hard
If
to
you had a
match
little
up.
note that said that, that would have been helpful.
Yeah.
A lot of the shrinking of the font here is due to that comment area on the right-hand side that tells what the change was. But again, that font's not really very large either.
Right.
And it doesn't have much to say.
So,
Deleted, 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 deleted.
in terms of tonight being a workshop night, we can take the discussion wherever we want. But Robert, thank you for the offer for having us color documents next time, and also maybe like a computer screen where we can put it up and scroll around and look at whatever we want to look at if anybody does dive into a particular point. Can we also, between meetings or like after this meeting, email a PDF or
I will do
Word
that.
version of it so we could all look at it on a computer?
Yep.
Or maybe that was in the email related to the
Ooh, the electronic,
pre-meeting
yeah,
information.
it might have been. I don't know that for sure, but either way, I'll resend it to everybody.
Yeah, if that came through in color, I can print it out at home in color, but I couldn't work with this one.
Okay. Robert, what do you need us to do in this workshop other than kind of take all of this in and move ahead to a public hearing?
Yeah, basically that. If there's any questions that kind of jump out that I need to get clarification on or try to help answer, then please let me know. Otherwise, I plan to move forward to schedule this for a public hearing before the planning board for a vote to recommend to the town council for adoption.
Okay. And then I understand that there's going to be similar changes to our site plan and subdivision regulations, which have a different adoption procedure because those are adopted finally by the board rather than a different authority. So if we make such changes to those regulations, we can do those ourselves.
Correct.
But otherwise, it's similar kinds of changes. Okay. What's the will of the board with respect to potentially moving this proposed zoning ordinance amendment to a public hearing before the planning board?
I think that's a good idea.
Do you have a date?
That was
That's a
so
motion.
moved.
I don't need a motion for that. It's just
didn't think so.
nods. Yeah.
Okay. So if you don't need a motion, then that's fine with me. What date are we talking about having a public hearing for that?
Don't have one in mind. I'd probably push it to May because
May,
the 16th. I don't have time for that anyway.
Okay. So one of the May meetings?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll see if I
Look-
can't
look
be
at what
absent that
else
day.
is on the meetings and kind of schedule it.
Exactly. As I watch the deadlines come in, and we'll try to keep it away from anything larger that might show up.
Okay. Then that completes that agenda item, and we are looking at next, planning and zoning administrators report, discussion, possible action, or other items of concern. Is there a planning and zoning administrators report, Robert?
I have nothing to share this evening.
Robert, it seems that we almost always have that report. Is there content that we should be looking for in a report? Is there things the board would regularly like to know that we could have a more substantive report from time to time?
You know, that's one of those items that's always been listed on the agenda since I've been here, and I don't know that I've ever had anything to share specifically. If the board has anything that they want to have us bring, I'm more than happy to do it.
Okay.
I just don't really know what to offer you.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I know that there was some time a while back where we wanted to have some indication of administrative approvals that the department had undertaken on particular applications. Any indication of timeline for conditional approval that expires on an application? You know, that there'd be a mention that so-and-so's 12 months has run out and they haven't come forward. Those kinds of things. I don't know what else we might want to have as a part of a planning and zoning administrator's report. Certainly when you have staffing changes, you guys always remember to tell us those, but.
What about enforcement actions or anything relative to our sign ordinances or any of those kind of things? Is anything going on with any of that stuff? I mean, I see flashing signs and other stuff all around town, flags and stuff, and I don't know what our current status is on how we're dealing with those.
Robert, are we actively engaged in dealing with any of our sign ordinances, or is that, how's that approached?
Well, enforcement-wise, we actually have, I think, 3 letters out on flashing signs right now. I think one of them just responded today. That aside, I have a document that I've been keeping for a while for internal use that might actually be of interest to the board, because pretty much everything you guys just mentioned is in this document. I'm tracking conditional approval timelines, I'm tracking enforcement actions, I'm tracking upcoming agendas for planning zoning, where everything sits, needed items, stormwater reports that we're receiving, where we have pending bonded work that we need to track for COs and things like that. So maybe part of the report is just to update this, even if it's just once a month, and just distribute it and say, here you are, whatever questions you have.
For the sake of enough paper, I don't know if I need a written copy, but just, to go through in the planning zoners report and say, here's what's changed the last time, there's been nothing changed, or we've gotten, conditional approval has expired here, and we've done a administrative approval over there, and we've got 3 enforcement actions out for planning and zoning violations.
All right, so just
And
a
then-
general record of the action staff's kind of taken, and where administratively conditional approvals kind of stand. And
Since you bring it up, Bob, there's a couple things I get questioned on regularly by people I meet on the sidewalk, where we have sidewalks, and and one of them is the status of the French restaurant.
The French restaurant?
Yes.
No, the Lebanese restaurant over by the
Lebanese,
library.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, if I
Are
can.
they ever gonna finish it?
He is working on it very diligently. He is doing the work himself, so it is going very slowly, but he is coming along. I don't know where he stands right now in the process, but I know he's done a lot of work in the past year.
I know he's doing it himself. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just a
My wife showed me, I don't know if it was from Facebook or somewhere, but they published their menu and they said coming soon, and they kind of, get a little bit of a vibe going for it. And
Yeah.
The inside looks like it's
Close.
got a
Looks like it's
Yes.
set up. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's done a tremendous job for doing it
Yeah.
all himself.
Yeah.
It's coming along. He's working really hard.
Yeah.
the questions I always get is, what's that?
Yeah.
Something under construction,
Yeah,
what's
what
that
is
going
it?
to
What
be?
is it?
Yeah.
Yep.
And,
Yeah. And the other one they ask about all the time is the Red Barn. It was
Which Red Barn? Oh, what's
what's
his name?
his-
Chris's former
Chris's,
place.
yeah.
Oh, yes. That one, I can't speak as much to that one as to what's going on there.
Merrimack Vision
Unfortunately,
Center,
he's
right in front of Synergy
tied up
Storage.
doing his other things
Was
or
gonna be
something right now,
apartments, and
so
Chris
I
got
think it's
approval.
kind of on hold for various reasons.
Looked like it was done almost, it was ready for occupancy, but it's been almost a year unoccupied. Yeah,
I don't know how long it's been on.
people
but-
get curious about these things,
Sure.
they.
Well, the other one is the old Levi Lowell's place.
That one is still conditionally approved.
That's just gonna fall in on itself.
just me. Chris doesn't own the Red Barn anymore. He sold it with Synergy, or do we know that?
He does still own that.
He does himself own it? Okay.
Yes.
I thought he would want to put his apartments together because that's what he was working on.
I think it would cost him
Yeah.
just have it sitting there.
Although, who knows? It's up to him. I don't know that we could have a regular report that answers all the what's that's.
No, it was just,
What's that gonna
you
be?
just brought it up and I couldn't resist asking. Since these are things that people keep asking me that I don't know the answer to.
Yeah, I just tell them it's an apartment. So they love that answer.
Yeah.
Either that or another Dunks.
Another 50 apartments.
That's it. Most time I'm not getting the questions directly. Okay, enough of the planning and zoning administrator's report. Do we have any other discussion and possible action regarding other items of concern? I do know that the Robert distributed the email about the planning and zoning conference from the what used to be called the Office of Energy and Planning. Now it's the Economic Development or something.
Office of Planning and Development.
Planning and Development. I had attended that conference a couple of times, and then I hadn't for many, many years because it conflicts with a regular class that I would teach at UNH. And so I haven't been to it in years, but it was a very good conference, highly recommended, especially for newer board members, to learn some procedures about how planning.
I already signed up.
How many of those have you been to? All of them?
More than you can count, right?
I think the last time I went there was when they were honoring you for lifetime achievement, and then you had another lifetime of achievement after that, because it was probably 8 years ago or something. Something like that. So, I remember that hotel in the Armory in the hotel in the middle of, across from what used to be the Verizon and now is the Snoo Arena. Changed the name of everything.
I will say it is online at this point, and they do record them for future viewing, so it's still.
Oh, I would
Could
hit
be worth
myself in the toe with a hammer before I'd watch an online conference. Those are so awful. I mean, the content is great. I'm sure people are working at it hard, but it's so hard to stay focused on an online conference where you're not meeting the people from other boards and doing all that networking and stuff.
So it's
Yeah.
all online?
It is an online session. However, again, this is where the future being recorded for future viewing comes in handy, so you can skip and find the parts that are of interest to you.
Okay. I don't have any other possible action regarding other items of concern. Well, maybe I do. There are two of our members who are alternates seeking a full-time position, and at least one other rumored candidate who might be interested in the board. So there may be some interviews and some potential decisions that would recommend to the town council. I don't know any specifics on exactly how all that will shake out. Obviously, it depends on interviews and things, but a little bit of movement in there, and I think it
That's good.
probably at least has the potential to end up with one more individual as a member or alternate member of the board, however that shakes out.
When would that be, June?
So they were trying to schedule 2 interviews tomorrow, I think, and I couldn't make it tomorrow because I was supposed to be in Maine, but then I'd not go into Maine because of the snow. So maybe now I'm available, but I don't think anybody else is available in the snow either. And so I didn't hear a rescheduled date on the other 2, and I don't know if the third potential candidate is going to get looped into that cycle or be somewhere later.
Where are we with?
Openings on the board?
There is one full-time member
Full-time.
position open.
Oh, okay, only one open right
Yep.
now? Yeah. And
And-
3 alternates anyway hanging out here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although 2 of the alternates are interested in the full-time position, and then another candidate who may join somewhere in the board. I don't know where. My plan is to put that decision in the town council's hands. Let them sort out who gets what seat. But
It's their job, right? That's,
well, I mean, I'm part of the interview process, and I make
Yeah.
a recommendation.
You're supposed to make recommendations, right?
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. But anyway, that may progress somewhat between now and our next meeting, although probably not to finality. Because it takes a little while after those interviews for it to come before the town council and go from there. Okay.
And who knows what the town council's gonna look like?
Oh, that's right. You guys have an election? When
Oh.
when do people take office after an election? Like right away, or is
No.
No, a week after.
Yeah, you got a recount period.
Well, you're up, Tom.
Yeah.
And I see your signs around. Who else is up?
Nancy and Nancy are up.
The 3 incumbents have all filed.
So you, Nancy,
Nancy,
and
Myself,
and-
Nancy Harrington, and Nancy Murphy.
Oh,
And
they're
then
both
Charles
running
LaFawn.
again,
And
as
then-
well as you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Charles LaFawn
Charles
is the
LaFawn is the
fourth one. So you're gonna get 3 out of those 4.
Okay, who's the 4th one?
Charles LaFond.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I know that he's run for a thing or two because I've seen the signs, but I don't think I've met him.
Is it ethics he's running for?
He's also running for Ethics Committee.
I have heard his name in town circles, but I don't think I've ever shaken his hand.
Last time and maybe the time before that also, a couple of times now.
Microphone on. Your microphone's off.
You're right.
Yes, it is. Confirmed.
He shut it off.
Well, because I was getting echoing, I had turned it off,
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
All right, so let's attack the minutes of March 5th, 2024.
I move we approve
Is there a
as
second?
distributed.
I'll second for discussion.
Any discussion of the minutes?
Yeah.
No discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes of March 5th,
Aye?
say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining?
Abstain?
One abstention, 401 to approve the minutes. That business is done. The motion carries. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 500 to adjourn. Thank you all for the work, and don't forget to turn your microphones off.